Hello and good day, everyone. My name is John Galbraith, and I am responsible for the delivery of the advisory services and one-to-one experiences at Tech Alliance. And I am delighted to be here hosting today's chat. Today, we're going to be talking about mergers and acquisitions, buying and being bought. As the Regional Innovation Center for Southwestern Ontario, Tech Alliance empowers world-class ventures and fuels growth in Canada's innovation economy. We champion and coach entrepreneurs, amplify and impact businesses, and contribute to a bold technology community across Southwestern Ontario. Simply put, we support your ideas and ventures at every step of the entrepreneurial journey. Mergers and acquisitions are usually not the reason we start businesses, but it frequently becomes the end goal or major focus for many ventures with an eye towards sustained growth or the almighty exit. Often a lengthy, complicated, legal, and even emotional process, the end result can be a game changer. And today we will look at the whys, the hows, and the whats when looking to buy or whether looking to sell. In this chat, we'll hear from three founders, three leaders who've been on both sides of mergers and acquisitions table, sharing their lived experience, firsthand knowledge, and even a few potholes to avoid. So let's start with a bit about our guests. Tarique Al-Ansari is the founder and chief executive officer at Paystone. Tarique led Paystone to become one of Canada's fastest growing fintech companies, winning many awards and accolades along the way. Paystone impressively completed 5 acquisitions recently as part of its growth strategy, and Tarique has a vision to make Paystone an industry trailblazer, leading the charge on market consolidation and becoming London's first unicorn company. Welcome, Tarique.
Thank you, John, for having me.
Lindsay Schneider is the CEO of Arcane, a leader in the digital marketing industry and one of the fastest growing companies in Canada, featured on Deloitte's Technology Fast 50. Lindsay has led large change management efforts, culture shaping initiatives, and built scalable people programs. She was a finalist for the Business Achievement Awards and is a speaker on topics including women in leadership and women in technology. Lindsay, it's incredible to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thanks so much, John. Excited to be here.
Last but certainly not least, our good friend Davey Lee. And Davey comes to us from a recent exit that he did in Saskatchewan, where he co-founded tech startup called Townfolio, that managed internal and external data for over 400 local governments. Davey's alumni of both Techstars and Next Canada accelerators, and has been featured in Startup Canada, BetaKit, Business Insider. Most recently, Davey joined our venture growth team here at Tech Alliance to pay it forward and help guide other founders on their journeys. So Davey, great to see you.
Excited to be here. Thanks, John.
You're welcome. And we're incredibly fortunate to have such leaders in tech right here in our community, and even more so that we have the opportunity today to, maybe dig into some of their lived experience and maybe provide some wayfinding, lift the fog for others who are striving to follow in their shoes and maybe execute on some of these strategies. So I'll get off my milk crate here and we'll just kind of jump right in. So I'd maybe ask everyone to set the stage for our audience today. And maybe just give us a quickly tell us your merger or acquisition story, kind of set the stage for us. And Lindsay, why don't you kick things off with Arcane's journey?
Sure, no problem. So our journey from an acquisition perspective happened actually back in March, April timeframe. So you can imagine going through an acquisition and a worldwide pandemic at the same time. I've never learned so much in my life than I did in that period. But it's a very exciting time for Arcane. We went about a lot of planning up until that point. Very excited to be part of a parent company now called Republics. So it's a newly formed company that consists of 6 different agencies, all within the marketing space. So we've been through, a full year, just over a year now, and we're learning more about each other as agencies. We call ourselves citizens. We're learning how to collaborate, really come together to drive better results for our clients and to truly be better together. So it's been a very exciting time for us.
That's amazing. What a great success story, Lindsay. And congratulations to you. And I'm sure it's not all roses right now. And I'm sure we'll, as after the acquisition, we'll get into some of that stuff coming up. Tarique, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Paystone story?
Thank you. So Paystone is, in a nutshell, is a payment processing company. So we do the electronic payments acceptance and we help businesses accept electronic payments. And I would say in 2017 or 2016, the vision really started to evolve into, we want to help businesses grow. We want to help businesses grow their customers. So how can we deliver on that growth? And the idea became, there is a lot of different payment players that focus on different areas. And we wanted to really focus on the growth aspect of it so that the value proposition that we're delivering to businesses is we're helping them grow. And we wanted to build we had a very visionary product roadmap, and we thought we're not going to be able to build everything. So we thought we could hit two birds in one stone. Through being acquisitive, we can get scale by, getting market share, and at the same time, acquire certain pieces that would complement the product for that product vision that we had. And that's what set us on an acquisitive path. And so far, we've completed 5 acquisitions, and we learned so much in the way. It was fun, but it wasn't easy.
I'm sure. And that's one of the things that, buy versus build is one of the things that often comes up in this acquisitions conversation. And so I think you and Lindsay are uniquely positioned to kind of provide some insight into why companies choose to maybe buy instead of build. So Davey, tell us a little bit about Townfolio.
Yeah, for sure. So, for our M&A journey, it was a 5-year journey. We ran a company for about 5 years, but I'd say in an M&A perspective, we really had like 2 really good conversations. Year 3, we had, let's just say, a strategic company in the same space approach us. And we got pretty deep into that process. And that was before COVID. So it was a very like in-person kind of event kind of thing. But unfortunately, that fell apart like pretty deep into it. And then year 5 happened, and that's when we had the successful, and that was during COVID. So Lindsay, like you, it was really strange going through it like a COVID deal. So everything was done remotely, but both of those companies they approached us actually. So it was a really good experience to see, and that's basically Townfolio's journey from that perspective.
That's really good insight, Davey. And I guess so. Maybe being kind of recently exited, and first I'll do a little bit of a disclaimer in that just approaching a conversation about mergers and acquisitions with somebody who's recently exited or recently merged or recently been acquired. Sometimes there's going to be points that we can't talk about. I'm just going to ask you guys questions, and I need you guys to lean on me and tell me if that's something that you can't talk about. The last thing we want is to get anyone in trouble today. But with that being said, Davey, as a recently exited founder, perhaps you can tell us the process about like identifying interested parties and what those first conversations were like. How did you approach them? And then kind of, maybe if you could talk about how did you get aligned internally? Were you guys even for sale? Like some of those questions about how did it all come about from like an approach standpoint and then internally?
Absolutely. And I guess the thing I would say before I get into it is that companies are not sold, they're bought. It's a very big difference, right? And the reason I say that is, when we first started the company, I'll be honest, like selling was always like a checklist on my to-do list professionally, right? And we tried like the outreach, like early on, be like, hey, we've got a few customers. Are you interested in buying? Like we did the whole cold call outreach, trying to talk to as many companies in our space. And yeah, they always have like the first dating conversation of like, hey, what are you about? This is what we're about. Then you hear about what they're looking for. You're like, oh, we don't match those requirements at all. Not even by a long shot. So for the longest time, we said, let's just keep doing what we do best, grow our startup and see how it goes. And that's probably where a lot of the best discussions actually happened, was we didn't even actually go out and outreach anyone. They came to us. As long as you're growing, and that's a conundrum. As long as you're growing and you're doing well, companies will approach you. If you are not, and that's probably when most founders want to sell, no one's going to want to buy you. And that's just from my experience anyway. So both the things I mentioned before, like they came to us and we were willing to entertain, because you never know, right? And it might be a good fit, might not be a fit, but essentially you always have to be in a position of power to best position yourself for the best exit possible. So the first time actually it was a strong referral from like a friend in my Techstars cohort. I went to the Techstars accelerator. So he just said, like, I happen to know this guy. They're in the same, they work at this company. They're in the same space. And I think they're buying companies. Are you interested in talking to them? And we were just like, yeah, sure. Why not? Let's see. We thought of it more as a partnership kind of perspective. Like, hey, can we help scale up our customers because they already have a network of customers and whatnot. So what ended up happening is we had like a pretty in-depth conversation of just like, I guess you call it like dating. Like, this is what we do. This is what they do. And then you would have like the in-person meetings of like, this is what it looked like. This is like this is how we could look like. And then eventually it gets to a point where someone has to be direct of like what you want to get out of this, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say after like a month or 2 months of dating, we were just like, hey, what are you looking to get out of this partnership meeting? Because this dating thing is kind of driving me crazy. So let's just get straight to the point. And eventually, they will say like, there's 4 ways we work with startups. It's either like reselling, partnerships, all kinds of things. And then obviously the last one is acquisition, and then the requirements for it. Mm-hmm. So I said we would be interested in that kind of stuff. And that's kind of how it really started going into like, pre-due diligence, and then due diligence, then LOI, and then even more due diligence. And then along that, what you would hope is like a very short, like I was naive. I thought it would be done in like 2-3 months, ends up you can range anywhere from like 6 to a year, 6 months to a year. It takes forever. And there's no guarantee, even if you have an LOI, that's going to go through. So that was the first one in terms of experience from my perspective of how we were approached. The second was, again, it was approached. And this one was interesting because one of the benefits of going, like we went through Techstars, one of the benefits is you get a lot of press around there, right? You get pitch day events, and a lot of people kind of hear about you. Once post program, we had a lot of companies reach out to us just because they watched our demo day event, and it kind of highlights all the benefits and what our revenue looked like too. So we were approached by that, and to be honest, that's the best way of just getting acquired. That's the only way, in my opinion, that works best. All my other friends who've gone through acquisitions, they were always approached, and the ones that sold, or like who were like outreaching a lot of people, they struggled because a lot of the time they may have been acquired, but really like the deal wasn't that great. It was more like a talent acquisition, if acquihire, and those are never usually beneficial for investors or founders. It's just like trying to get like a check mark to make sure it like looks decent. So I can't get into super detailed things because I'm like really concerned about my post-legal obligation kind of stuff. But what I would say is the other question was like, how do you get the founders on board? Honestly, it wasn't that hard. The idea of selling as a founder is always kind of like a dream. And I think a lot of founders dream about it. But I guess I would say it's a lot harder. And the hard part is actually keeping all the founders engaged during the due diligence process. Because that, and I know maybe Tarique can speak to it more clearly, is a very exhausting process, and purposely done to be exhausting for the founder, for my experience, to basically, tire you out throughout the system so you can, maybe negotiate things near the end when the lawyers get involved. But yeah, that's kind of my experience, and hopefully that helps a bit in terms of.
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting take, Davey, and that the kind of that idea of being for sale is again, like you founders were aligned, and I think you're right in the innovative space. A lot of things, that is kind of the holy grail of entrepreneurship, that path of entrepreneurship. But we kind of see, different businesses, and I think, that dovetails great into asking Lindsay about the, kind of the situation at Arcane. Is unique that you guys it's a different kind of merger. It brings together. It's a newly formed organization that brings together 6 like-minded agencies. So I'm sure there's got to be some unique challenges or advantages come along with being part of a brand new venture.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going through an integration or an acquisition, when you have a newly formed company, there are definitely challenges. Trying to go through the change management process within Arcane, but then also, that our parent company, Republic's, also still trying to build the foundation and the core elements of a startup business. So you think about, carving out, what are those values? What are the strategic priorities going to be for year one? Is the vision really solid, and really help having those agency leaders be part of those discussions while still trying to build the confidence, and really help people understand the vision and where we're trying to go within our parent company. So you have these two things, sort of like lead the people and get the vision and the buy-in, so that people are excited about the future and where we're going to go, but then also having to build that foundation like any other startup business. So you have those two things that are sort of challenging, because in some sense there's the competing priorities here. So but I think coming out of this experience within Arcane is the advantage of that is that, and any entrepreneur or business leader would probably get excited about this, because you are part of helping shape that newly formed company. You're part of building out those values. You're part of building out what is the operational structure, the financial reporting going to look like. So all the agency leaders that are part of Republics got to come together and are still coming together to collaborate and have those discussions and really be part of building this, the parent company Republics. So it's helping people embed themselves and get a deeper connection to Republics, our parent company, and be part of that startup mode, which we all get really excited about. So, and we've also been able to really share best practices across the agencies and bring operational expertise to help really lay that foundation for Republics. So I think, that's a huge advantage is there's definitely challenges, definitely things that you need to overcome and have a really thought out plan around how you're going to navigate through that. But the advantage, really does weigh out the challenge, because you really are part of something to build and to be part of, a group of agencies that really are on the same path and really see and believe in our vision, which is, creating a bigger performance engine to do what we do best, allowing us to be better together, and grow alongside our extended network of agencies at Republics. And we believe we'll only gain sort of more profound service offering and provide more value and ROI for our clients. So, yeah, I mean, it's been exciting, and we have so much work to be done, and such an exciting future ahead.
It's funny when you're talking, Lindsay, because I grew up in the 90s, and I think about all like the super groups, like the bands that got put together from remember like Temple of the Dog, it was Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, and it seems like you're the new company is a super group, because you all had validated, probably growing businesses, so you were all making music on your own, and now just imagine the music that we can make by putting us together. So really cool kind of profound thought there, that this startup has already had the validation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, everybody is coming at this that they really do want to be better together. There's not this competitiveness, this like ego, or it really truly is a sense of uniting and coming together and collaborating and truly being better together. So it's a really great scenario.
That's cool. Great stuff, Lindsay. So Tarique, the point you found yourself in that we already kind of talked about is where many founders find themselves. You identified that you needed something to take Paystone to the next level, or your organization at the time to the next level. So you had that choice to make. Are we going to build this, you guys, or are we going to buy it? And then if we're going to buy it, how do we do that? So first of all, how do you assess the decision? There's a lot of risk both ways, obviously. So as a leadership and as a group, you probably had to think about that for a while. So let's start with that question. I'll probably have a follow-up there too.
So I would say, actually, we tried to build it. Not really build it, but we tried to take a crack at it. And we realized it's gonna take so much, and not just the time. I actually, listen, I'm always guilty of being impatient. And so is my team. And it's always about how can we get it as fast as possible. And also, because it's not just about getting it, it's about after you put the two together, how do you make 1 and 1 equal 3 or 4 or 11? So that's where the work really starts. It's actually after the deal closes, when you're actually taking the combined entity to market as a combined entity. So that's really how it was. It's like, okay, let's take a crack at it. And we realized, we do the assessment, and we're like, or this is going to take us like 18 months to build or 12 months to build. And then you're thinking like, I can get validated product with the customers and just do it that way. But I'll tell you, and I'm lucky that Lindsay and Davey spoke ahead of me. They made me think of something. When you do acquisitions, John, there is really one of two types of acquisitions. There is the one when you're doing the due diligence, it's really cost synergy focused. So you're thinking like, I'm gonna put the two together, I'm gonna cut this cost and this cost and this cost, and this is how we realize synergies. And there are ones where you do them because it's an alignment on the product and it's really product led. And by the way, it doesn't mean that they cannot be both done at the same time. But usually when you're just doing cost synergy, you're not really looking at the product. And oftentimes you could be looking at the product and also realizing some cost synergies in the way. For us, we tried both, and I really enjoyed the product-led ones because they bring something really exciting to the team internally. And for that one specifically, usually most deals fail because of people. And we extend the time of the dating that Davey was talking about. It's just getting to know the other side and getting the alignment with the founders. Because oftentimes, if it's a product led, you don't want it to be just an exit for them. You want it to be a combined beginning for everybody, like Lindsay talks about, the Arcane deal. And that's where the alignment is super important. So we spend a lot of time getting to know the other party, because we realized that if anything we learned from mistakes of previous ones is you didn't get enough time dating, and then you end up like realizing some surprises after on the people, because most issues are actually people related. And by extending that dating time and the alignment, it makes the closing time so quick and so easy. Like in our experience, we tend to do from LOI to closing 60 to 90 days. We don't want it to be past that. We don't want to burn the founders. We really want them to be like super excited about, coming together and taking things to the next level. But we may spend more time doing that dating part, and we're exploring like which one is the better target, and the building versus the acquiring, all of that in that dating stage. And if you're being transparent with them, they will lead you towards it. They will tell you like, hey, this makes sense or this doesn't make sense. And we should do this because it makes sense, or no, we shouldn't because we're better off, doing it some other way. And honestly, I would say just keep it transparent with the other party, and all the pieces are gonna fall in place together.
Okay, so I've got two follow-ups, and I'll ask you. The first one is curiosity. So I've watched some of your acquisitions, and was it important for you that you first look for those companies to be in Canada at all, or is that part of your strategy?
Yeah, so it's just because most of our customers are Canada based, we didn't have much in the US, so we really wanted to just expand our Canadian footprint. And I know everybody looks at the US as a bigger market, and we entered the US market this year, and we're seeing so much growth in the US market. But I always believe that we need to build the Canadian scale up and be like known brand here in our backyard before we look at going internationally. Also, when you look at Canadian exits, there isn't as much competition on value as you would say in the US. You tend to get a better deal buying a Canadian company than a US company, just because of the valuation difference. So
right, was the exchange rate. Yeah. That's really cool, Tarique. So now I've got another quick follow-up, but this is kind of to Davey's point. Have you ever been cold called and then bought a company, or were you always like looking for the companies?
Actually, so Davey's point is so right. Companies are never sold, they're bought. Whenever somebody reaches out to you to be bought, unless you really want to buy them, to be sold, unless you really want to buy them, the deal doesn't happen. So the buyer has to want to buy it. So yeah, you get a lot of people cold calling, but not just because they're selling, they're going to get sold. It's because you want to buy them, you end up buying them. So this is really how it is. And yes, we do get cold. I would say not often, because I'm very active on the outreach. Okay. So, like we always have this pipeline of people. Like I'm actually talking to a lot of companies personally on a weekly basis. And because we're very active in the market, like we really know what's out there. And again, the deals that we're going after are all product led. So we find them because really it's the product led that makes us find the targets. So we know what we want to build from a product roadmap, and we're like, okay, this is the missing piece, and let's look for this because that's what we're looking for. And that's how it ends up happening in our case. If we were just looking for cost synergies, the pipeline would expand more significantly, but that's not really what we're after. We really want to go after the product led growth.
Right. So I'm sure your inbound calls increase a little bit the day after a press release of an acquisition you've made. Maybe everyone's like, hey, we should call these guys, jump on the train. So that's awesome. So I want to get to our next round of questions. And this is probably why I was most excited about today. And it's just perspective. We talk to entrepreneurs, all the time about, attributes that make companies, desirable for acquisition. And we have this unique opportunity of these kind of three very unique perspectives on attributes as it applies to your lived experience in acquisition. So Davey, I want to start from your experience. What attributes did Townfolio have that made it a desirable acquisition for the folks that acquired it?
So it's an interesting question. And I want to get into details, but I can't get super detailed. So I'll kind of keep it slightly high level. We were growing and we owned a specific market in Canada, but we hadn't tapped into other markets at all. And there was an opportunity to do so. The fact that we're growing just itself sets like the minimum bar. And then when you introduce a larger player who has the connections, who has a network to take it from, like Tarique said, from like 1 + 1 = 11 or something like that, they can see the path to revenue from that. So from my perspective, that's what Townfolio had. I think the other thing to keep in mind is like, there's also like, 3 types of acquisitions I tend to categorize. There's the talent, there's a strategic, and then there's the revenue. Like to me, like and this is actually interesting that Tarique brought up about like culture and fit. So my first one that failed was actually very similar to what Tarique was saying, a very long dating process. But it was incredibly important because to me, it was a very strategic type of acquisition potentially. And you want to keep the team members on afterwards. You want to engage. You want to like have chats with them. You want to make sure like it's the right thing. Because I truly believe like had there not been a good fit, like it would have fallen apart real quick. And that's not good for either side, right? Fallouts and, so I'm actually really happy to hear Tarique's like actually got like a pretty like upfront like process. Cause like that's knowing my experience now, that was probably one of the better like experiences of like how it should go. Frustrating at the same time, but very like clear about fit being the most important part. But for me, like a lot of it, I'll be honest, like part of it is luck too. Because it depends on the space you're in and like how that specific space is growing. I happen to be in government technology. That space is starting to ramp up right now, especially during COVID, because everything's going digital. So that inherently attracts a lot of other players into the market, whether that's financial or strategic. And that creates a lot of consolidation plays like down the road. So for me, the attributes were luck, right time, right place, growing and profitable. You had those 3 things going. Like Tarique was mentioned, there's people that have that will reach out to you, and a lot of like whether that's corporate or financial, whatever, they have sourcing teams that their job is to find interesting companies. When I didn't have any of those things, no one reached out to us. That was me like trying to like sell like a dream, but not necessarily like coming to fruition. So hopefully that kind of explains from my perspective what are desirable like attributes to be bought.
Absolutely. There's growth, there's a business, there's a market, and then there's an upside, right? So it's kind of, really high level. Lindsay, totally respect that. You can't talk about this one. Or did you pass on the one in the chat? Or
I can answer the one you're asking the group. No
all
problem.
right.
Sure.
Let's jump to that if we can, Lindsay.
Yeah, so I think for us, when I think about the other citizens, we call them citizens agencies that are part of republics, are both sort of complementary and similar services to what Arcane offers. So ultimately, pulling everybody together is going to help deliver and sell more for our clients. But core characteristics in terms of what Republics is looking for certain agencies, and why, you know, Arcane was, you know, they had reached out to and was very interested. Obviously, you have the financial component to buying any business, whether it's a minimum of EBITDA, you know, your strong cash flow. So there's that financial piece that's really important. Another component would be, you know, strong leadership teams. So they see that there's leadership's intact or strong. They have the skills that are required to help grow not only their agency, but to be part of Republics in providing perspective and input and how to grow Republics and to acquire more agencies. But then also, you know, the talent that's required to build Republics as well. Like, what are the specialized skills? What are those competencies that make up that team, and how can that help ultimately scale and grow the parent company? You know, another piece, obviously looking at the client base, so long tenured clients. What does that monthly recurring revenue look like? And are you progressing towards productization? I think that was a big key component and characteristic of looking at, you know, Arcane, and how does that Arcane ultimately help progress towards the productization side of the business. And then, you know, new vertical expertise and proven case studies was another, you know, core component when looking at what citizens to bring into the fold. But again, like I echo a lot of what Tarique and Davey have said around the dating period and how core and critical that is, because there has to be some sense of alignment, both on the value side. What do you value? What are you trying to achieve? And get a really good feel of, you know, how are you going to work together? The human part of it is so important, you know, to understand personalities, understand and really dig deep into that vision. And what are we trying to achieve here? Because you really, as a leader of an agency, and for me specifically, is you have to be bought into the vision. Because it's going to be, you're going to cascade that down to the rest of your team. So you really got to, you know, do your due diligence, spend time understanding how things are going to work, how you'll work together. That dating period is crucial.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I wish I could be a fly on the wall in the strategy room at Republic sometime. It just kind of, because I feel like it's kind of like building a hockey team or a band or something that, like, it's a very, they've got it, you know, they've got it figured out what they want to do and what they want to execute on. And it was just a case of bringing the right people to the party. So I'm super intrigued about this, Lindsay, and thanks for telling us about that. So Tarique, as the one who's out there kind of hitting the pavement, doing some outreach and kind of looking for things like this, what are you looking for?
So right now, okay, so like I told you, we did both. We did cost synergy, scale, you know, revenue acquisition, and then we did the product-led ones. And I really enjoyed the product-led ones more, and especially for the team too. When you bring an acquisition to the team, you know, the excitement is that it's making us closer to our vision, and it's getting us ahead. Not just, oh, we're just adding scale or adding revenue, even though that's important, and we will continue to do that kind of deal selectively. But really right now, what we're focused on and what we're after is, okay, here is the vision we're building, here is the product roadmap that, you know, we're executing towards, and in that, what are the missing pieces, and can we acquire them or build them? So usually when we're looking, it just really starts with the product led. So there is a missing component in our product roadmap, and this will accelerate, you know, completing or achieving the product roadmap. So that's where it starts. Then in the dating period, it's all people focused. It's just the alignment with people. And then after that, the due diligence comes last, which is when you're doing your legal and your financial due diligence. But first we look for the product alignment, and then, or the product fit, and then we look for the people alignment. And these are the two most important things to start with.
So maybe just taking a look at Ketan's question in the chat there about kind of managing the people side, it seems like you've built that into your process of, like, you guys use that dating period to foster that comfort level and ensure that we don't have the you know, the kind of hesitation entering the deal.
Yeah, so just for the ones who are watching, because they probably could not read Ketan's question because it's only to the panelists, I just noticed. So she's asking, how do you manage the people side, risk of flight or fear of being bought or sold. The people on both sides are usually nervous, especially if you're being acquired, thoughts. So this is where the dating period is super important and being very transparent. When when you are acquiring somebody because of the fit and the alignment, and because you want to put one and one together and it equals 11, really, and it's not everybody on the team. There is, of course, some people on the team that you have to be comfortable with them leaving because it's a choice. But you're talking about with the key people, which usually are the founders and management, and some key people on the team, like if they have some architect or something like that. And these key people, you have to be like very transparent with them about what you're building, the challenges ahead, what to expect. And if you're transparent, they would actually tell you right away, like, oh, you know what, I'll give you the next 2 years. No, I'm out in 6 months. No, this to me, I'm looking at retiring. Somebody will be like, oh, I'd love to stay here for the next 10 years. And that's when you do, that alignment. And then you align with the key people. Now, usually in companies, and once you do the acquisition, if you are transparent in communicating the plan and the team knows that this is not a cost synergy, like I'm not just acquiring these two companies to do cost cutting, then that takes the fear away from a lot of people. Because now people are not like, oh, we're not consolidating marketing team to cut half of the marketing team. Really, we need even to expand the marketing team even further. And when I see of who did it really right in Canada is really Lightspeed. Lightspeed executed so well towards their organic growth and building their product differentiator and strategy around the POS space, and also acquiring market share by doing certain acquisitions that A, complemented the product, and B, gave them market share. And every time Lightspeed share price, market cap, and team size just grew even further with the combined. And I'm not shy to say this, Paystone would love to be the next trailblazer in the Canadian market and build something similar where everybody we acquire knows that we're putting 1 and 1 to equal 11. And this is not a cost cutting move. This is, let's just take the growth further and add more people to both teams. If you're taking it from that approach, it takes all out of the fear away. And there is, of course, still uncertainty and a little bit of instability. This is why I'm so lucky right now with the HR team that we have and the experience that they have. They've been amazing. Even we made some hiccups, but we got so lucky. And I know Lindsay can talk to the HR piece because she's really, really like strong in on that front. But once the HR team gets so experienced with it, you start communicating more frequently and take a lot of that uncertainty away.
So it's not just all process. There's a big people aspect to this too.
Yeah.
It's all people, I would say. Very little. I mean, okay, you cannot do people without process, but it's really heavy people.
Davey, if you don't mind, and you can talk about it, what about, how do you handle the people to the question, like, what about the people about on the being bought side? How do you keep your team motivated and a lot of that stuff? How do you address?
Yeah, so that's really hard, to be honest. So I would say with my first potential talks, we as a company, we were pretty generally open about all things and everything. Has its positives, also has its faults when these kind of discussions start coming up. Because once employees start hearing about it, they get distracted. And then that's just speaking from experience. They start looking into the companies, they start researching them, they think about what they would do at the new companies. So from a productivity level, it kind of decreases, unfortunately. But I'm very transparent, and I do believe you should communicate with employees very early, that there is something, but maybe to a certain point, maybe when you get an LOI or whatever. Mm-hmm. I made the mistake of talking it way ahead. But in terms of talent retention, Tarique made a good point there, and from my experience is very true. They're very transparent to start. They ask who the key people are, and they want to know, in the event, if an event happened, who would be required to run the company, and then what do we need to grow it to X amount. So you just have to basically be upfront, talk to certain, because if I had to do it over again, I would talk to select people within my team saying, this is what's going on, this may happen. And once it got a bit more further down along the road, I would bring up to employees and say, this is what we're thinking, FYI, and this is what they're thinking potentially. There's always going to be risk. Some employees get spooked by that, and you can't avoid it. It's something, but it's better to communicate early than actually when it does happen, and then suddenly all these dominoes start falling into place. So I wish there was like an easy way to like handle this. There's not. Like everyone's going to have a slightly different situation with it. And I wish I had a great HR team like Tarique had, because honestly, it probably would have saved me away a lot of headache, but I didn't. So, I hopefully that answers the question a bit.
Absolutely. And even in our brief discussion today, I think we've talked about, how culture is important and the alignment of culture and core values. Then not only that, but, just like the company mission, like Tarique's in the business of helping the customers grow and scale. So how do these acquisitions fit from a execution and mission standpoint? But not only just like the personal side of it too. Like we're entrepreneurs, we wanted to do this. So there's like so many different considerations that we're super fortunate to have the opportunity to talk with you guys today. And I'm always mindful of the time here, and I think we should probably round the corner and wrap it up. So I always like to do kind of my end palate cleanser to kind of send everyone off, because sometimes and I'm the same way. We see stories of acquisitions and mergers, and we see them in BetaKit and TechCrunch, and they seem superhuman sometimes, but it's things like this that can kind of humanize this. And we see, folks from Davey to Tarique to Lindsay are actually doing this stuff. So my palate cleanser to each of you would be, what is your biggest entrepreneurial blunder, if you could share with us, and that'll even help us humanize, tech entrepreneurship even a little bit more. So Lindsay, if you don't mind sharing, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's definitely a few I could speak to today, but the one that stands out the most to me is really, leaning on those people that have gone through or currently going through, whether it's entrepreneurship or leading businesses or at whatever stage in their career. I think I wish I experienced the value of that, what that brings earlier on, and really did, leverage my network and really tap into those people that I'm surrounded with that I can learn a lot from, hearing from whether it's entrepreneurs that have failed or succeeded, learning from their stories. I mean, we all have a story. We've all, have gone through sort of the challenges that come with, leading businesses or entrepreneurship. So really just learn from the stories and apply that knowledge in your own entrepreneurial journey. Not only are there lessons to be learned, but it really does help provide clarity, for me personally and my business. So I recently joined, the YPL Groups of Young Presidents Organization, which is a worldwide leadership community, and have the opportunity to learn from, forum peers. It's one of the best investments that I've ever made. It can be lonely. You always hear that saying, it is sort of lonely when you get in a position like this. But it can be lonely being, an entrepreneur, starting a business, a CEO, or at any point in your career, really. I think if there's one thing that I've learned and I really do value today, it's really do lean on those people that are going through similar business challenges. I know I could call Tarique or call Davey, and we could really talk through, how to help one another through a certain challenge that we're experiencing. But it can be really reassuring, and that experience that people do have is really helpful. And I think pay it forward is sort of my motto, and so that's one thing for me.
I gotta say, I feel that one really hits close to home for me too, Lindsay, is really kind of reaching out and asking for help and understanding that, there's other folks that have gone through this, and it's not everything you see in TechCrunch, right? It is human, right? So Tarique, do you have something you could share with us, a little tidbit to send folks with?
I do, but first I want to mention something about HR, because Davey, we didn't start strong in HR. We made a ton of mistakes, and we were very under or spread thin and did not involve HR early enough. But I learned from all these mistakes that now in 2021, we're better off and much stronger. Just to be clear on that. But that's definitely one of the things we learned. I would say the biggest thing I actually learned in my entrepreneurial journey is, why stick to just London for the talent? Like I was so, like, for 10 years, I was so focused on, I gotta build the Google of London, and from an office culture, I'm talking an environment, and make it like so buzzing, and the vibe that people love to just come work here, and I was like so focused on that, and then COVID taught me that I was wrong, because it's not really the office itself. It's really the talent, and it doesn't matter where they are. They could be in like Halifax or Winnipeg or whatever. And right now, most of our team is actually outside of London, even though our head office is still in London. But we have a lot of team members now in Vancouver and Montreal specifically, and then across Canada and even in the US and other parts of the world. And that is probably something that I would tell everybody. Just expand the horizon, basically. Like, just look for what's out there. Don't stick to just London for talent, but also don't stick to Canada for market. Don't stick to Bay Street for investors. Really look for what's out there. It's a big world and it's very connected, and we're very lucky we live in 2021 where you can connect with anybody and everything. And on Lindsay's point, I would say one of the, and she nailed it, like one of the most underestimated things in learning is actually podcasts and reading books of other founders and what they've done, what they've been through. I think that is so like underestimated, or and people talk about education, courses, MBA and all this stuff, but I've learned so much from podcasts and books and reading other founder stories. And yes, of course, interacting with them and asking them the questions and learning from their experiences. I cannot stress that enough. It's super important. And if you can do more of it, just do more of it.
That's incredible, and as so exampled by today, Tarique. We make this content available so other folks are able to consume it and take what they will from it, and maybe try to help them if they're experiencing something's keeping them up at night. It can be that one little tidbit that either helps them fix that problem or sleep a little more soundly. Davey, what's your biggest entrepreneurial blunder?
Yeah, so I kind of an odd one. So to give you context, our business at the time was very like go to a conference, journal up business, kind of like that kind of stuff, right? So it's very B2B heavy. And so we were used to doing this. This is like year 1 or year 2, essentially. And we had a very smart individual in our space approach us and somehow convinced me and my co-founder to pay and fly to go to a conference in Nigeria with the promise of landing big contracts. When you're young and naive and you want to take over the world, you think, the whole world is your ocean or your customer. I'm going to say, like, I agree with like thinking big, but when you're at a certain stage, you got to kind of like narrow it down a little bit, maybe Canada, US, North America, same time zone at least, because it makes your resources a bit more easier. So let's just say we went to that conference. My wife would never let it go. I hear it to this day of my biggest blunder. She comes up to me, Bo, yo, you remember that time you went to Nigeria for that conference and you said you were going to bring back millions? Do you know how much you brought back? 0. So that was definitely I would say my biggest entrepreneurial blunder, because we paid quite a bit for that conference. And when you're like year 2, cash flow is pretty tight. So whether you want to say I got conned by Nigerian prince, whatever, I don't care. Like, it was a big learning experience, but at the same time, it's a great life experience too. So I've learned a lot about going there.
So it seems like just a little footnote to Tarique's, it's a big world out there, but proceed with caution. There's
very much so.
Yeah, I am just so thankful to y'all today for coming out and imparting your wisdom and your lived experience with us in the Tech Alliance community. And thanks to everyone. And I'll let you, with that, we'll wrap things up and let you get on with your day. Thanks a lot, everyone.